always disappointed. We are lucky today. Those of you who may have been around for a while, juniors and seniors, may remember some years ago when Mr. Stoltenau brought in a Holocaust survivor to speak to everybody as part of the Holocaust unit that he was doing with freshmen, I believe. We are incredibly lucky again today because we do have a Holocaust survivor who has agreed and consented to come in and talk to us about that experience. And it's an increasingly rare opportunity because, of course, as time goes along, that was a long time ago, and there were fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors present. Just to introduce our speaker, Milton Kleinberg, the gentleman all farther to the right, is a Holocaust survivor who recently published his book, Bread or Death, which tells the story of how he and his family managed to escape the Nazis in Poland, only to end up in a prison labor camp in the Soviet Union. Today, Milton is a philanthropist as well as the owner and CEO of Senior Market Sales, a successful insurance brokerage company that employs nearly 200 people in the Omaha area. After publishing his book a little more than a year ago, Milton has been engaging in various speaking events and interviews across the country, where he tells his amazing story of survival and perseverance. And in fact, this past November, he spoke in front of more than 5,000 people in New York City. After Mr. Kleinberg is done speaking, he will be at a table over here. He will have his book for sale, if anybody would want to do that. If you just want to stop and ask him questions or talk to him, I'm sure that he would be more than willing to talk to you and answer your questions, any questions that you may have. And just as a reminder, and it was on the email that was sent out to everybody yesterday, there will be a free will donation that will be taken at the end of the presentation as well. So let's give a Lincoln Lutheran welcome to Mr. Milton Kleinberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I gotta turn this thing on, don't I? Can everybody hear me? I am. My God. I gotta make it a little quiet, I think. Is that a little too loud? Oh, okay. I see the kids for the thumbs. All right, drastic things. As you can tell, I'm an old timer, and I came to the technology world screaming and kicking, and I'm not quite fully adjusted. But anyways, like everything else, you get along. I want to tell you something interesting. I also graduated from Lincoln High School, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 1955. Seems like 100 years ago. But the name Lincoln sticks out. And I hope you had as good an experience here as I had then. And it was a very welcome experience. My name is Milton Kleinberg. However, I was born Mendel Davidovich in Papiniec, Poland on January 28, 1937. It was absolutely, in all of Jewish history, this was the worst of all times to be born Jewish. Hitler, the Chancellor of Germany, was ranting all over the world with his anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish descriptions. He wrote a book telling the world, Mein Kampf, he called it. He told the world what he plans to do with the Jews. But nobody believed him. Nobody could envision such a madness to actually be done by a people who the world considered one of the most civilized at that time. But at the same time, he was getting ready to invade Poland. Actually, he was ready to invade Europe. On September 1, 1939, the German army invaded Poland from the west. It's called the Blitzkrieg. It happened so fast nobody could realize how fast it was. And a lot of people don't realize it, but they had allies. The Russian allies invaded Poland from the east 17 days later, dividing the country between them. And those of you who will study history will learn that this is the fourth time those two, Germany and Russia, divided the country, Poland. The River Bug was the demarcation line. On one side was the Soviet Union, on the other side was Germany. 8 days after the war began, German troops were marching in lockstep down the cobblestone streets in Babinets, Poland. The first thing they did is they started repressive measures against the Jews, trying to separate the Jews from the rest of the population. On Rosh Hashanah, which I hope you know is the Jewish New Year, they destroyed the synagogue and turned it into a barn. Germany actually annexed western Poland and called it Wonderland. And one of the edicts in that annexation said that no Jews will be permitted to live in Germany. And so that meant we were in Germany now. That also meant forced deportation. On a cold December morning in 1939, German troops surrounded our street called Ulica Kościelna and forcibly evicted us at bayonet point. We had less than an hour to grab what we could carry. Then they lined us up 4 abreast and marched us down to the train station, right through the center of town, where the population was looking on. Do we have that up here? Right through the center of town. I don't know where I was there, but that's a long time ago. Waiting at the train station was a locomotive attached to about 15 to 20 cattle cars. The smell from the cattle cars was strong and overpowering. It seemed that the cattle were just unloaded and we were taking their place. Then they herded us into those cattle cars as tight as could be. There was barely enough room to turn around. And after 36 hours on the train without food or water, the train stopped at a city called Sidlisk. There we were ordered out. The air hit us like a slap in the face, cold air. But actually it was almost invigorating just to be out of those sticky cattle cars. Then they lined us up and they marched us down to the Jewish section of town. And there was a burned out synagogue. The fringes were still smoldering. The smell of burnt flesh was all in the air. And they told us to get into the synagogue. We were all reluctant to go in, fearful that once we were inside, it would torch the synagogue again with us inside. But then German soldier says, there's water and bread inside. So we overcame our fears and walked inside. We found some space next to some of our relatives that were deported with us. After we looked around and we saw what was happening, we saw an elderly man with a white beard running around a burned out altar and arguing out loud with an invisible person. He was wearing a prayer shawl, he had a prayer book, and he was chanting prayers and running around and arguing with him out loud. The rest of the people in the synagogue just ignored him because they knew that his wife and son died in the fire, so they figured he lost his mind, so they just left him alone. For 2 days, we observed this tortured man running around and arguing with that person. Then we walked up to him and asked him who he was talking to. He got, in the saddest eyes I have ever seen, he said, "The angel of death." Then he says, "But nobody but me can hear him." Then he made a few turns around there, went over to my mother and gave her his belongings. My father, he gave some money, and he told them in a resolute voice, "You must cross the river boat to the Russian side. On the other side there's at least some hope and life. Here there's nothing but death." Then he walked back to the place where his son and wife were burned. He took off his coat, folded it up into a pillow, laid it on the scorched ground. Then he took off his prayer shawl, folded it up, put it right on his jacket. Then he took his prayer book and gently laid it down on his prayer shawl. He quietly and slowly lay down on the floor, rested his head on the prayer book, and he said his last prayer quietly, and he died. I never knew, I don't remember him telling us his name, but in my dreams he calls himself Abraham. And whenever I'm in a tight spot, he comes in and he tells me things are going to be all right. In a sound, resolute voice. And this. So then my parents took, he called himself Abraham. So my parents took Abraham's word to heart, and the next day they found a Polish border guard whom they bribed to take us across to the other side, to the Russian side. I really don't have the time to go into an interesting story about how we got across on the boat, because we could spend the whole hour just on that trip across the river. You're just going to have to get the book to find out the rest of the story. That's all there's to it. When we crossed the other side, we were arrested by the Russian NKVD, which later became the KGB. They arrested us and they deported us to a town not too far away called Białystok, to a Polish prison camp or holding place. During the war, when the Russians occupied that part of Poland, they deported 1.5 million Poles to the Soviet Union, to various places, from Siberia all the way to Central Asia. And we were all earmarked for deportation. On the morning of in April of 1940, we were told that we were going to be deported. They put us on trains with boxcars. The boxcars were a little bit differently than the cattle cars. At least the smell wasn't there. And the cars, the Russian cars, were a little bit larger. As a matter of fact, if you went from Poland to Russia at that time, when you came to Białystok, you had to change train tracks because the Russian tracks are wider than the European tracks, where they just took the bus, they took the cart off and they put it on a different track. In the train, we were with other Poles of all nationalities, Jewish and non-Jewish. And our first trip was to Arkhangelsk. Arkhangelsk is, best I can describe it, it's located north, but it's the most eastern part of European Russia, next to the Finnish border. Arkhangelsk was a timber town consisting of small wooden huts and wooden sidewalks. Everybody there worked in either lumber yards or a collective farm. We lived together as a family in a small wooden house on a collective farm. We lived there for slightly over a year. My mother gave birth to my youngest brother, Bengal, in that Arkhangelsk. And just as we were getting used to that terrible cold place, it's hard to describe that place. It was cold, half the year was winter, half the year was summer, and during the summer, the mosquitoes and all the bugs ruled. But at least during the summer, there was plenty of food, wild berries and mushrooms and all that kind of stuff. But the Russians didn't even bother to guard us. They realized that we were in the middle of nowhere with no place to go. A couple hundred miles down the road, or 100 some miles, was Finland, but you couldn't get there even if you wanted to. So, in summer of 1941, the war caught up with us. We were told to get ready for relocation. In 1941, the Germans invaded Russia. That was the end of the love affair between Russia and Germany. They came across a 1,000-mile border with tanks all over the place, and I think the battle was called Battle Barbarossa, and they were coming very fast. They were occupying very big swatches of Russia. Of course, they didn't realize what they were going to get into after a while. The going was good in summer, but it wasn't so much going good in winter. But anyways, the Russian army decided to move all their manufacturing and all the industry from eastern part to Siberia and Central Asia. And in that, they moved a lot of the people from the east going to Central Asia. We were ordered to get ready for relocation, as they called it. They issued us passports with poles stamped on it, and they gave everybody ration cards. The ration cards entitled a person to 550 grams of bread, which is about a pound less for children. It was barely enough to keep body and soul together, but without that bread, death was a certainty. That's why the book is called Bread or Death. This time on the train, there was 5 of us. My mother was nursing Verbo. Father was in charge of trying to get supplement, barter for food at train stops to supplement the ration cards. What we used to do is get off the train, whatever trinket or anything they had, they bartered for food. And my responsibility was first with my brother. So he was a handful. Any of you have young brothers like that? I'm sure you do. Anyways, the journey was long and arduous. The journey from Arkhangelsk, and we were going towards Samarkand, Uzbekistan, which is in Central Asia. The journey was 4,500 miles, all the way across Russia. Under normal conditions, when the close to normal conditions. We were going in the heat of battle, which meant that the journey was extended 3 horrific months. So for 3 horrific months, we were in cattle cars for people. Our boxcar had about 35 people, which included men, women, children, and some, and even grandparents. They all were all shipped together. And it was, there's a lot of stories on that train trip, which is a book of its own, matter of fact. But we don't have the time to get into it. But I can tell you a couple interesting incidents. And a spot someplace between Ons and Novosibirsk, my father got off the train to bargain for some food, and he never came back. He just gone. The train was around for a couple of days, but he just never came back. So, my mother, Gergel, Herschel, and I were all stranded on that train. And we were dependent on the good people of the train. But the worst of it was that when he left, he took with him the ration cards, he took the passports, he took any money we had, so we had nothing. And without the ration cards and without the passports, we were completely dependent on our neighbors, who themselves had barely enough to eat or to do. On one occasion, my mother even tried to be a beggar. She tried to make herself look pitiful, walking around. I was hanging onto a skirt. My brother Herschel was, and she kept a blanket over my brother Gergel. But the problem is everybody looked pitiful. And she wasn't very good at it, so she gave it up. She didn't want to have anything to do with it. Then a Polish woman who was a friend of my mother was also on the train, and she had bad luck after she left Poland. Her husband died in Arctic, and her son, who was my age, a little bit older, died in an accident under the train. She was just completely devastated. She had a baby that my mother helped to take care of. Then her baby died from typhoid or from starvation or malnutrition. She came over to my mother to thank her for her kindness during the dark days, as she called them. And she gave my mother her passport, her ration cards, and says, 3 ration cards, and now she says, you are me. The Russians will not be able to tell us apart. So use it sparingly. And that most likely helped to save our lives at that time. Then, clutching her dead baby, and before anybody could react, she opened the door of the train as it was moving. We were coming around the bend, and another train was coming from the opposite direction. And before anybody could react, she yelled out, I have nothing to live for. And I leave you, myself, and my baby to this cursed land, and jumped. Now we saw quite a bit of that on the train and surrounding the train and the area. But that particular action unhinged everywhere. And it is a sight that's with me all the time. And then, in fall of 1941, the train stopped for the last time. A tall Russian officer with all kinds of medals on his chest opened up the sliding door of the train and yelled out, welcome to Samarkand, the jewel of the Orient. And said, pick up nobody was disappointed that we weren't going to come back to that day. We were deported to Samarkand because we were replenishing the labor, the dwindling labor work in Samarkand. Samarkand had two basic commodities, and they needed a lot of labor. Most of the men were drafted in the army, so mostly women did the kind of labor. The commodities was tobacco and cotton, and everybody was assigned to work. The place of work determined your rations, your food, your status, and all the things that you needed. Dwelling depended on the job you got. So everybody had to get a job. My mother's first job was in a cotton gin. And she and the little ladies, the ladies there, sitting on little benches, picking seeds out of raw cotton. Has anybody here picked raw cotton? If you haven't, I can tell you it is top work. Apparently the cotton gin hadn't arrived to Russia at that time. I think they had one there now. But picking the cotton, they took out the little seeds, and the seeds they made oil out of, and she worked on that. And we played in the background. Then a friend of my mother, who had a scheme in mind, asked my mother to get a job in the tobacco factory where she worked. The scheme that they developed was stealing small quantities of tobacco, which they shared with the guards and the manager. Tobacco was the best currency there was. It was even better than money. In Russia, if you had money, they were considered you a capitalist. They weren't kind to you. But tobacco was a currency you could barter with, you could bribe, you could do anything you wanted to be. But that kept us with the extra food alive. In May of, I think it was May of 43, my brother Herschel came down with malaria, and in spite of my mother's bargaining effort, he suffered for a month and he died. And that devastated both of us for a very, very long time. Then, after Herschel's death, my mother and her friend Kaya managed to get me into a Polish children's home. This Polish children's home was located someplace on the old Black Road, about 10 miles out of town. The old Black Road goes back to the days of the Silk Road that went across Samarkand all the way to Iran. The road hasn't been much improved, and the bandits haven't gone away. So it was a dangerous place to walk on that road. In that children's home, I came of age. I met two like-minded boys, and together we set up our clubhouse in back of the outhouse, and we called our clubhouse Argentina. Why Argentina? You'll have to read the book. Simple as that. But in back of that house, we were scheming how to raid the orchard across the Black Road and the vegetable garden about a mile down the Black Road to supplement our rations that we were getting. One day, we were sitting at the vegetable garden at sunset, hiding in the bushes, waiting for the workers to leave so we could steal some vegetables. Then all of a sudden, an argument broke out that last two people there were a Russian and an Uzbek. And the argument flared out. Uzbek grabbed his curved knife, cut the stabbed the Russian and his back repeatedly until he fell. When he was back down, the Russian looked around to see if there was anybody watching. Then he started running away and he threw away the knife. The knife landed in the bushes not too far where we were hiding. My friends wanted to run away, and I said, no, I'm going to go look for the knife. He said, no, police is going to come to go get us. But I said, no, I'm going to stay there and get the knife. My friend Piotr, by the way, my two friends were Piotr and Edmund. Piotr stayed with me. I found the knife, I cleaned it up and put it in my pocket. The knife was a lifesaver on several occasions. I don't have the time to list all the occasions, but on one occasion, Piotr, Edmund, and I were walking down the Black Road, and there was a horse-drawn wagon full of apples going down there. One of the wheels got a little close to the edge, and some of the apples fell off and went into the ditch. The three of us jumped into the ditch, and we filled up our shirts with apple. As we walked out back to the Black Road, we saw on his back on a donkey, swearing in both Russian and was back and barely holding on. Looked like he was going to fall off, but he just swearing. And when he saw us, he dismounted, came over, tore my shirt open, called me a Rapchuk in his native tongue, which means thief, and then he grabbed his knife and curved knife me. Those packs always carried curved knives with them. And he took a slap at my throat. I jumped back with my hands outstretched. He missed my throat, but he got me in the right armpit. Then my friend Piotr grabbed his walking stick and with the hard side hit his back on the head. His back went down on his knee. He was a little shaky. Then my adrenaline kicked in. I got it in my pocket, pulled out my knife, asked me to use his back, wanted to grab the knife. I stabbed him in the throat and twice in the stomach as he was moving out there. Somehow, the Uzbek managed to get up, get on the donkey, and the donkey and the human cargo walked down the Black Road, and it stopped at the gate to the orchard where the donkey lived, I guess, and the Uzbek slid down and died down there. There were several other occasions where our friend Edmund was kidnapped, and we managed to save him. There was once where I was stealing some peaches, and they were shooting at us. I thought they were just trying to scare us. Well, they scared the hell out of us. But I didn't realize at the end that I was actually shot in my left knee, but it missed the bone, so I was lucky there. There were a lot of those kind of incidents that happened in 43 and 44. In 1945, May 9, I think May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. While the world was celebrating an end of war, the Jews didn't have much to celebrate, as we found out later. The children's home and all the faculty and personnel, we were all transported back to Poland, a city called Białystok, we were all sent back to Poland. And together. Wrestling. I knew it was going to come back. I just didn't wait let alone. City of Breslau. Ended Breslau, children home. My friend Piotr was reunited with his wounded father. And Edmund was reunited with his mother, who was just released from the concentration camp. And wouldn't you believe it, I was reunited with my lost father as well. There was one little catch though. By then, he already had a wife and 2 children. And my mother was going to come 2 weeks later to Breslau to a very big surprise, as you can imagine. Happiness after the war was not recognizable. We couldn't find one recognizable or one Jewish face in the entire city of Happiness. The peddlers, the sounds, the smells, the Yiddish written signs on the store windows, it was all gone. It was as though we never were there. Everything was cleaned out. No sign of Jewishness anyplace. And to add insult to injury, our Polish neighbors made it very clear that Jews were no longer welcome in this new Poland. So as Jews have done many times before, put back what was left of our shattered life and moved on. We went in the city of Breslau. My mother met Aaron Kleinberg, and they were talking about their future. And in that future, they planned to go to Belgium when Aaron Kleinberg had a brother who had a restaurant in Antwerp, Belgium. And we had to escape Poland for the second time. And we did escape to Poland second time. Then we ended up in a DP camp, a displaced persons camp, in the West, in the American occupied zone of West Germany. And we spent 5 years in several displaced persons camps. In one of those displaced persons camps, Aaron married my mother, and my sister Bessie and Goldie were born. So now there was 4 of us again at the beginning of the rebirth of a generation. On May, actually in April of 1914, they were liquidating all the displaced persons camps, the DP camps. And we came down to Brenhaven looking for a country that would accept us. At that time, there were only 3 countries that were accepting Jews. One of them was, of course, Israel, but they were in war. The other one was Australia, and of course it was America. We were fortunately enough that we got passage on the General R.M. Letchworth. And we arrived in America on May 14, 1951. From there, we went by train to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, into a happy life. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I started school, graduated Lincoln High School, and then I joined the Army, spent a tour in Korea, and after the Army, I came home, I found my wife, we got married, and now I have 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. and a very successful business. I came to Omaha in '84. I had a successful insurance business in Milwaukee, and they were looking for someone to help them run the business, and eventually I bought the business. It's called Senior Market Sales, on the 84th and Dodge in Omaha, Nebraska. Any questions?
Let's do this, Mr. Kleinberg. Since you're going to be around, any students who might
Yeah,
have
I'm going to be around.
Okay. Any students who might have questions can stop at the table and ask them there. And anybody who wants to buy a book can also do that. There will be a couple of student council students over here that will be collecting money for the free will donations that will go to, what was the organization again? The Institute for Holocaust Education. Okay, so that'll occur at the door. Let's give Mr. Kleinberg a Any general questions?